Marathon has just been fully revealed, and as the newest extraction shooter on the block, it seems to be doing a lot of things right, despite the negative sentiment that we've all been seeing online. And I'm not talking about the gooners or hate merchants here, I'm talking about some of the more valid criticisms. Because you see, while extraction shooters have been one of the most sought after genres to dive into after the Battle Royale craze, they are incredibly easy for developers to fuck up. Sure, we've had some great indie developers see some small amounts of success within the genre, but there has not been a single successful AAA attempt yet. I mean, if you thought the amount of dead hero shooters and battle royales was crazy, at least some AAA studios were able to get a few BRs off the ground. But has Bungie refined the formula enough to become the first AAA development studio to make an extraction shooter that will actually stick the landing? If you're new here, my name is Artie, and while I am a full-time esports coach and caster, I'm allowed to enjoy some non-esports multiplayer titles from time to time, and I'd be super appreciative if you hit the subscribe button down there. I think with the amount of indie devs who've tried to make extraction shooters work, it has led to the notion that the extraction shooter market is saturated, but that could not be further from the truth. For starters, there have only been 2 real attempts by AAA developers to make an extraction shooter, neither of which were dedicated game modes. Not to mention the fact that the majority of the indie attempts no longer even exist. And secondly, people are kind of viewing this genre similar to the Battle Royale craze we had a few years ago. Now, I could spend 20 minutes going over the Battle Royale problem, but this video is about Marathon and extraction shooters, so I'll just give you the short version. Fortnite, Apex Legends, and Warzone became the dominant BRs that they were because they were AAA developed. After PUBG's explosion in 2017, Epic Games adapted Fortnite Save the World to be a BR in about 2 months, and it was wildly successful. Apex Legends had about 2 years in the oven, coming out in February of 2019, and it was also wildly successful. Warzone started its life in the Infinity Ward offices in 2018, and similarly had about 2 years of dev time. What these games had in common was twofold. They were all AAA development studios, and they all adapted existing game frameworks into a BR because it was a popular and new genre. But these success stories are far outnumbered by the amount of dead BR games. I like to do funny lists in my videos, but it's genuinely not even worth it for BRs. And besides, again, this video is about extraction shooters, so let's talk about the extraction shooters that we've had so far. We'll put Escape from Tarkov into PUBG's shoes as the first of its kind to really do it right. The Division fans, I see you, I hear you, but not right now, please. EFT is the closest thing that we have to a AAA extraction shooter, and since 2016, the game is still in early access. And unlike the Battle Royale craze, while we got a slew of companies trying to make extraction shooters, we didn't really get any AAA ones. At least, none that committed or even tried to understand them in the first place. The only 2 real attempts by AAA studios were what we got from COD and Battlefield, but instead of creating bespoke game modes, they were just additions to the main course, with nobody having the guts to create a standalone experience. This is because, unlike Battle Royales, the extraction shooter genre doesn't really have a defined blueprint. COD Modern Warfare 2 tried DMZ, but didn't really understand the genre and got a ton wrong. Battlefield 2042 had Hazard Zone, but that game really didn't understand the genre, and it got so wrong that many people refused to even call it an extraction shooter. I am so sick of the saturated market claims, so let's just talk about the ones that we do have. Escape from Tarkov is the most popular and the current gold standard. Arena Breakout Infinite is popular, but it's very arcadey. It has static and clean maps and bad looting and economy, but has decent PvP. Delta Force is kind of popular, but there's no depth to the progression or the maps, and there's no real punishment to dying, and there's pretty bad PvP. Hunt Showdown is popular with a very good game and very interesting classes with great PvP, but it's not the same because there's no real economy. There's tons of good things to loot, but it's all about building your character and not really around the economy. Gray Zone Warfare had a lot of hype on its initial release, and it might be popular one day, and there's honestly great missions in my opinion, but everything else is weaker in comparison. Dark and Darker exists, and it has a couple thousand players on Steam, but it's also not a shooter. The Forever Winter is small, it's very good, it's like Helldivers 2 and Tarkov had a baby, but it's a slightly different niche of the extraction shooter because of that. And I know, Marauders and Level 0, they still exist, but they have less than 500 active players, so come at me. But following the blueprint of the Battle Royale craze, now it's time for the experienced developers to put their hats in the ring. For example, we have Shark Mob coming through with Exoborn later this year, we have Arc Raiders from Embark Studios, the developers of the finals, and finally, the point of this video, Marathon from Bungie. We are now officially entering the AAA era of extraction shooters, and what that means is that there has been enough data collected from both the games in the dead and dying pile and all of the successful and Escape from Tarkov. So as the official first AAA dev to do it, what does Marathon need to get right? Earlier, I said there wasn't really one main blueprint to an extraction shooter, but there are 3 main pillars: the in-game economy, the mission and progression structure, and the gameplay itself. If you look at every extraction shooter that has tried to make a name for itself, they have all failed to replicate the main thing that makes Escape from Tarkov so addicting: the in-game economy. Now, that's not to say it's the only reason, especially when games like Hunt Showdown have proven that you don't need a system like that to be a good extraction shooter. But if you look at games like Battlefield's Hazard Zone, it's easy to see why this game mode died out the moment that it was released. There's no reason to go into a raid. But just having an in-game economy isn't enough. If your extraction shooter has an in-game economy and it's not good, that can be enough for people to lose interest. Let's look at the primary examples of this. In ABI, you're encouraged to buy in-game currency. Do I really need to say any more? In Delta Force and Gray Zone Warfare, the amount of money that you can make on the map through loot is not high enough to pay back for what you pay to get or maintain your kit in the first place. Arena Breakout Infinite wants the game to be grindy in order to push things like microtransactions and daily login bonuses, whereas Delta Force tried to remove as much friction as possible from its economy system by making simple objectives require random items and some cash. Gray Zone Warfare focuses mostly on guns, missions, and upgrading the kit on your person, which honestly is kind of the closest parallel we have to Marathon as it stands. But why do these games not have a robust economy the way that Tarkov does? Simply put, it's hard as to do. Tarkov's economy is built on the fact that you need random items for the more than 200 quests, as well as your hideout upgrades with about 30 modules to upgrade. Getting those quests done and upgrading those modules requires you to level up by getting XP from doing quests and extracting from raids, but you also need to level up your traders to get better deals, buy better weapons, weapon parts, and better ammo, as well as better gear like bigger backpacks and stronger armor. The list goes on and on. Tarkov has a great economy because it makes you care about looting things like light bulbs and soap while trying to figure out if it's worth it to take the shiny new SMG you just looted with you too. There's over 3,000 unique items in Tarkov and almost 200 different weapons, not to mention the absolutely insane amount of attachments for the weapons as well. If you really don't understand why Tarkov's economy is so good, go on Twitch to any Tarkov streamer. More than half of them are in their inventories right now playing Tetris, and they will be happy to tell you why they aren't selling all of that junk. Or ask them about their favorite gun that they built or extracted and when they're planning on using it in raid. They're not. Now, we can't really speculate on Marathon's economy too much right now. The lack of a player economy doesn't necessarily mean that the economy is going to be weak. The black market that we know of is going to be something that we can only truly figure out once it's in the hands of thousands of players. Now, it's not a player-driven economy, we know that much, but the fact is that we just won't really be able to get an idea of how strong that economy is until we experience it en masse. That being said, Marathon or any other game doesn't need to have 3,000 items and 200 weapons to be a good extraction shooter, but it does need to have a loot system that makes players desperately want to extract when they find the right items. But that can also be achieved through a good mission and progression system too. The factions in Marathon are the equivalent to Tarkov's traders, and like Tarkov, they have contracts and reputation. But what's different this time around is that the trading doesn't happen here. Instead, you work towards unlocking upgrades, kind of like a skill tree, in which these upgrades persist on your character no matter what. Things like increasing the amount of shield charge that you get after performing a finisher, or being able to purchase better backpacks from the shop. One thing that's kind of rough here though is that in the alpha, you can only do one primary contract per raid, as opposed to every other extraction shooter where you can try to do as many as possible. Now, this is one area where I truly do trust Bungie to make the game incredibly rewarding. Having grown up with Halo and having dabbled in Destiny, this is one area that Bungie knows that they're incredibly good at. Combine this with the fact that there will be seasonal storylines and seasonal progression tied to seasonal wipes, I really do think that they're cooking here. Speaking of wipes, let's talk about this here too. When EFT was still in the early beta, the developers were adamant that there would be no wipes when the game comes out. Since then, Battlestate Games has done a full 180. You now have two characters, a PvE character that will never wipe, and a PvP character that even on full release will have seasonal scheduled wipes. And this is because there's no real end game in an extraction shooter. Without anything to grind for and no glory to be gained, an extraction shooter loses its purpose. At the beginning, wipes were only a mean to an end, and when they launched, they didn't intend to have them. But over time, Escape from Tarkov realized that you do need them for an extraction shooter, and they naturally progressed to where it is today. But with Marathon, being built from the ground up with wipes being planned from the get-go is either going to be amazing or terrible. No in between. And we'll just have to wait until the game is out to see if Bungie have struck that balance well. To go back to talking about missions, I'm really looking forward to the main story as well as the seasonal stories. I have been a fiend for the Marathon lore over the last few years, and with Bungie's writing, I know that this game is going to be another absolute banger of a story that I'm sure will be nicely wrapped up in multi-hour long lore to sleep to videos, literally moments after the alpha ends. Another area that Bungie is pretty good at is gunplay and tight mechanics, so let's get into that. Tarkov, Delta Force, Arena Breakout Infinite, and Gray Zone Warfare all kind of feel like that gritty, dirty, gun-loving paramilitary fantasy. And I get it, I really do. But I would be lying to you if I said that I were happy to see another game come through to try and be Tarkov but for casuals. That's why with Marathon, seeing something that doesn't feel like Tarkov or like a Tarkov clone, but instead something closer to Apex really makes me excited. And I'm not saying that it feels closer to Apex because of the tiered shields or the different ammo types or the abilities or the way that all the weapons are gray, but then there's weapon mods with different rarities, or the way that the health and shield med items work, or the way that you can regen shields by executing a downed enemy, or because of the death crates, or because of the fact that it's 3-player squads. I'm saying that it feels closer to Apex because of the pacing of the fights. From all the pre-alpha footage that we've seen, seeing the AI put up a nice challenge to the streamers made me realize that that's another area where extraction shooters that aren't Tarkov all somewhat lack. And combined with that, the sizing of the maps, the layout of the POIs that we've seen, and there are just enough opportunities to be engaged by another squad that the overall pacing of everything that we've seen can kind of be looked at very similar to Apex Legends. And this is just what we've seen from the map Dire Marsh. During the alpha, we'll only get to see this map as well as the map Perimeter, but there will be a third map on launch that's rumored to take place on the actual Marathon itself. The loot that we know of in the game is as follows. There's weapons, weapon mods, cores, implants, backpacks, health and shield items, data cards, and materials which can either be worth something or junk, like organic lenses, storage drives, microprocessors, hydrocarbon rubber, spark leaves, plastic filament, etc., etc. It is good to see this kind of stuff is being thought about, but to be honest, I don't think that they'll strike that same level of, oh my god, I just found 3 light bulbs that I need to go now that Tarkov has. But again, we can't make this judgment until we have the game in our hands. So let's look at it another way. From everything we know, Marathon definitely seems to be carving out its own niche in the genre. From the unique aesthetics that stem from the fact that every single thing you come across has been 3D printed, including the runners themselves, to the abilities of each runner allowing for some interesting interplay between squads, effectively turning Marathon into the first hero-type extraction shooter. There's a lot to like, but it is still an extraction shooter, which takes walking a very fine line to get just right. And here's what concerns me the most. Like we talked about before, the seasonal wipes being planned from the start could be bad or good, but the reason for this being strictly one way or the other is because it might mean that players will naturally not care about what's in their vault. Of course, you'll always be striving to complete missions and work towards upgrades, but think about it. With nothing in your vault, you can drop into a match with a sponsored loadout from a faction. You use that to kill a squad, take their loot, and use that for the day, do 1 or 2 missions and extract a couple times, die a couple more times, and go back to having an empty inventory. But it's fine because you can just get another sponsored loadout, and again, keep going. And sure, while this might sound great to some people who are looking for a more casual experience, and I am all for making this genre a little bit more approachable, at the end of the day, the fundamental point of the extraction shooter as we know it is lost when you aren't afraid to die. And this is extremely closely tied to the in-game economy itself. Another area where I think the in-game economy is gonna struggle is the fact that it shows the value of each item to the player, which I think is a terrible choice for an extraction shooter, as it makes the player's decision for them. This removes an opportunity for skill expression in a genre that is built on natural complexity. Another issue that I can foresee with Marathon's approach is not having a hideout or some third thing to upgrade in addition to your runner and your faction. I think that Marathon really could hurt down the line if they don't implement something like this. Your loot goes back to the factions via the contracts, or into the black market, or into your loadout, then that's it. With Escape from Tarkov, even just the addition of the hideout made Tarkov infinitely deeper in the way that it changed players' priorities and added the opportunity for even the cheapest of loot to become worthy of the inventory slot it took up. And even though it is still way too early to tell for sure, I really do think that a third progression track is something that absolutely needs to be addressed before the full launch. While of course we have to wait until it's in our hands for the first time to decide, I actually am very optimistic for Marathon. I know that Bungie at least understands the fragility of the extraction shooter genre, and I think that they'll be utilizing the alpha and beta periods for this game to really take in feedback in order to make all the necessary adjustments before the final release. But I want to hear your opinion. Are you hyped for Marathon? Cautiously optimistic? Or have you already typed your hate comment and forgot to close the tab? Let me know in the comments, and while you're down there, I would love it if you dropped a like and subscribe as well to help get this video out to more people. I'm releasing a lot of content out here in 2025, and it helps me out a ton when you press all those buttons. Thank you so much for watching, and don't worry, you'll see me around.